Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the History Valley podcast of your host, Jacob Berman. Today I'm joined by James Valliant and Neal Sendlak, Gnostic Informant. Today we're going to be discussing philosophy, ethics, and also a myth vision video that made none of us happy. In which Derek brought on this guy that goes by the nickname Tjump. And he has these very funky, strange way of looking at atheist morality, and it made all of us feel like, okay, it would seem like he's proving the Christians right. At least the way he's portraying atheist morality would seem to prove their point. So you two started off, and I'll get my opinion in. I want you guys to start it off, because I know you guys have a lot to say.
Yeah, I just want to say, James, you can start it off, but I just want to say it didn't really bother me at all. It's just I didn't necessarily subscribe to exactly what he was saying, but I'm not mad or like it's not bothering me or anything. It's just, but it's something that you, Valliant, and I were discussing. Maybe we should do a video about morality and what we think about it.
Sure.
So yeah, go ahead.
And let me say from the outset, I'm not making a moral evaluation of the guest at all. There could be a perfectly innocent error of knowledge. Philosophy is in a shambles state, if you ask me, and particularly the area of ethics. And because, as you say, religion has basically had a monopoly until just the last couple centuries, religion has had a total monopoly on the field of right and wrong and morality and what it means and how we understand it. And that monopoly has still conditioned the way even secular atheist thinkers think about it. And it's not their fault. It's just the way that we've all been trained to look at right and wrong. And he does provide a good number of examples, because he went through what I regard as a number of fallacious arguments in ethics that are a problem for the secular and for the atheistic. And I just want to say from the outset, I think that's the real cause for the persistence of religion. You know, long ago, David Hume, a philosopher we'll probably get back to, in the 18th century, demolished the medieval arguments for the existence of God. You know, the teleological argument, only God can make a tree, you know, those kind of arguments. And he demolished them. And since then, no serious intellectual, no scientific mind of the last 200 years or so has really taken the idea of God as logically proven or something we necessarily need to believe in. So atheists and agnostics and at least generally secular ideas have dominated the intellectual world, the scientific and academic worlds. But they really have not let go of basic premises. And this interview today, in my view, revealed how some of those religious premises still sneak in. And in my view, the main problem that the new atheists have is this whole topic of morality. So long as religious people, my own parents are a great example. My own parents weren't particularly religious. You know, my mom had a statue of Buddha, a picture of Jesus, and she thought, well, all religions are basically getting at the same thing. And, you know, she was a California ecumenical hippie type. And so, she only took me to church because she thought that's the only place I could get moral training. Learn right from wrong. Learn to be an honest person who respected other people's rights and stuff. Well, if that's the only source for ethics, then of course parents are still going to, and until atheists give a solid answer on ethics, what morality is, why humans need it, what makes it objective, that problem is going to persist, frankly. Now, what are some of those problems? I hate to go on like this, like a lecture.
No, go ahead.
One of the things that he started out with saying is that he regards ethics as having nothing to do with consequences, with their effects in the real world. He gave us a bad example, in my view, and we can get to it in a second, that he said proves this point, but or at least points us in this direction. But he's separating consequences of our actions from their moral quality. So it's not that someone dies or that genocide occurs in Germany during Hitler. It's not the consequences that makes it good. Good is good in itself. Virtue is its own reward. Well, this is the theory of intrinsicism in ethics. It includes religious ethics, and it includes the ethics of a German philosopher named Immanuel Kant, who was very famous for saying that ethics had nothing to do with consequences. that ethics is, he had these, sort of rationalistic abstract rules for what made something ethical or not. And that if those rules are complied with, well, then we have a moral duty to do this regardless of our self-interest, regardless of the consequences. Regardless of the consequences. So the guest today said, yeah, his example was, if you knew Hitler was going to be Hitler, would it be okay to kill him as a baby? Well, no, killing babies is wrong. And therefore, it would still be wrong to kill baby Hitler. Now, of course, it's a bizarre science fiction example. No one can know that a baby will turn into Hitler. Yeah. He is a determinist. So he can't predict human behavior, and no determinist has ever been able to predict human behavior.
It kind of reminds me of that sci-fi series, I forgot what it's called, in which cops arrest people for a crime they're going to commit in the future.
They had a whole movie based on that, didn't they? Where you're arrested preemptively for the crimes that they could deterministically predict you would do.
Yeah, Tom Cruise.
Right. Well, see, wait, hold the phone here. Wait, hold the phone here. If you believe, as I do, that people have choice, then you will never be able to predict human behavior. Human beings have choice, and at any given moment can choose otherwise. In fact, the entire topic of ethics assumes people have choice.
Right.
It makes zero sense for me to praise you or blame you for being a liar or for being honest if you didn't have a choice. It would be as senseless as me blaming a tidal wave. The tidal wave just had to do what it was doing. If you're a determinist, we're all just tidal waves who really, maybe giving you advice will deterministically change you, but I can't tell you which way it'll happen.
And that's
no one can predict behavior.
That's what makes no sense about religious morality, because they'll say, where does your morality come from? Why do we know right from wrong? Well, they'll say it's within us, right? Okay, what does that mean? They'll say, oh, it's given to you by God, right? Well, if that's the case, if that's the case, why do we need a book then? Why do we need a law book?
No. That's obvious nonsense. For more of human history than agricultural history, people were cannibals and human sacrificers for thousands of years.
Right.
There is no instinct to not kill children, because the Aztecs would rip hearts out of children by the dozens at the top of their temples, and they did so as a venerable moral institution.
So that's where the theist comes in and says, see, that's why we needed the book, whatever book, the Quran, the Bible, the Torah.
Well, it is true. I agree that murder is wrong and human sacrifice is wrong. But why? What grounds the idea that murder is wrong? People's feelings? Because, you see, this is the option that religious ethics provides. You either think good is good in itself, regardless of the consequences, or that's the other side of the damn same coin, subjectivism and skepticism. Well, we can't be wedded to principles because, of course, religious principles can't be lived up to. No one could live up to Jesus's dictate, don't lust in your heart. We're all born sinners anyway. And religious ethics isn't about this world. It's about getting into heaven. And so, since it has nothing to do with this world... Well,
that's what they do. They create a
so the secular have accepted... So get this. That means that the secular have accepted the religious conclusion that the good is unachievable, that the perfect is never going to be attained. And so, therefore, we have to go by the seat of our pants as pragmatists, reject moral principles, be flexible, and that's the alternate. The secularists say be pragmatist, which is a rejection of ethical principles, or utilitarians with this weird math.
It kind of reminds me of that meme that's going around that, okay, boyfriend setting his girlfriend on fire, that's bad. Gossiping people to hell because they don't believe in him. Oh, that's moral.
Setting people on fire.
And my issue with that is like, okay, so if from the theist point of view, that the atheist is being subjective because that person doesn't believe in a God, well, they're believing in morality because a character they can't prove exists said so in a book. And in that very same book, that character happens to be very immoral himself, committing mass genocide, murder, telling the Jews like keep the women to yourselves, but kill the.
Well, that's what I'm saying. William Lane Craig would say, "Well, he's the creator. He created us all, so he has the right to do that. He has the right to take a life and give a life."
Right. So
God can be a total.
So it means rules for thee, but not for me.
And morality, therefore, consists in nothing objective, but simply obeying God's whims that he's free to violate himself. There's nothing objective in morality if God can say, to Abraham, go kill your son. Child murder is okay if God gives you the green light. And morality consists of your willingness to obey God no matter what, even if he tells you to kill your own kid.
Right. Now, I do want to jump back to Tjump for a second, because I wasn't really sure how he defined his morality.
Well, first he doesn't. First, it's sort of an ineffable mystery by the end of it.
Yeah.
It's one day, he says, one day we'll figure out what ethics is really all about, but we haven't yet figured it out. But he is sure at this point that ethics is an intrinsic thing, and that whatever ethics turns out to be, it is wrong in itself regardless of consequences. So in philosophy, he would be what we would call a Kantian deontologist, someone who regards ethics has nothing to do with its effect, the effect of your behavior. So he actually believes that in order to achieve certain effects that he wants, we should behave in evil ways sometimes. Okay, pause there. The whole idea of a theory-practice dichotomy, that something should be good in theory, moral theory, but not be practical in practice, totally comes from religion. How would the idea of something being good in theory even come up? How could something be good in theory if it didn't work in practice? It comes from religion. The minute you posit a supernatural dimension, the minute you believe in a God, you have driven a wedge between the ideal and the real. You've driven a wedge between theory and practice.
It's like somebody
and of course
saying
religion is going to be unlivable.
It's like somebody saying, okay, doing something particularly that's bad that is a crime is only theoretically a crime.
Right.
That's what
a religious approach. So you can see this intrinsicism in ignoring consequences, pure religious approach to ethics. This theory-practice dichotomy, a pure effect of it. And so he takes the other side of the coin, which, of course, every burned deontologist must take. What it boils down to is feelings, emotions, our subjective whims, what makes people feel good, without analyzing, and there is a whole school of philosophers who think ethics amounts to your going by emotions. They take emotions as givens. But look, some people are sadists.
Yeah.
Some people get emotional pleasure from torturing people and killing people. Some people, emotions cannot serve as an objective standard.
Right.
So,
no, absolutely. I agree with that.
So there's two sides of the same coin. Intrinsicism, that says it's good as its own reward built in, it's a religious idea, or the opposite. Well, then there is no ethics. We have to go by the seat of our pants. We can't have ethical principles. It all boils down to emotion, which is in effect what he was, both sides, both errors that in my view stem from a religious approach to ethics.
Now, I want to hear your opinion on this.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense a lot. I used to think the obvious answer to this was, well, the morality or ethics would be that making the best decision for the most amount of people the right choice for the most amount of people and the most spreading of whatever. But then you think about it, it's like, well, what if you live in a nation like North Korea where everybody just agrees that let's act a certain way because they're all brainwashed by the dictator, and there's only a few people who are actually good moral people, and they're the ones being screwed over by the masses. So in some situations, that's not the right course of action, which makes you almost wonder, is morality a situational thing to begin with? Is it situational?
See, therein lies the issue.
Yeah. Now I want to hear you think about it.
Can we generate moral principles, universal moral principles that apply to everyone because they're a human being?
Right.
And, really have them as moral principles? Or must we judge every situation anew as if newborn infants confronted with a new situation and judge each context for its own merits? Well, then we're adrift. There's too many facts. We're lost in the details. We can never really make that decision. No, this is a false dichotomy. We must take into account all the facts. We must take into account the consequences, but we must take into account all the facts.
Right.
Now, let me just give you how about a common sense thing that maybe most people could understand? I need to morally judge people, other people, for very important reasons. Forget the law. Forget whatever country you live in or whatever the law happens to say is good or bad, or whatever era you live in. If I want to make a friend, I want an honest friend, a loyal friend. And it could make a difference to my happiness. If I want a business partner, I don't want a cheater or fraud or a criminal. If I just want to interact with someone, he better not be violent. But choosing a life mate, I don't want some narcissistic, self-absorbed woman in my life, some draining exploiter. I have to make moral evaluations of people for my own specific interest. It matters. More than just negative evaluations, I have to make positive moral evaluations. I have to praise people for their honesty, for their hard work. I have to admire creative achievement. If I don't do that, then my happiness and thriving is in danger. Right. Moral judgment for me serves an immediate practical importance to my life in terms of real, and this is what I cannot understand, how atheists of all things, secular people, don't start at the ground level and understand where ethics comes from and why we need it.
At an individual level.
We need it and more than that. When I look in the mirror, it is even more important that I be able to judge myself. Have I lived up to what I could do?
Now, how do you get everybody?
I lied to myself.
But how do you get everybody
as productive and rational as I can be?
How do you get everyone to think that way? You can't. Could you?
Well,
or is there a way?
Well, let me put it this way. They've gotten people to base ethics on total fantasy. So let me suggest it will be a whole lot easier to prove an ethics that's based on a simple reality. So no, I think we've got it all over religion to get people on the same page once they grasp this. But understand, slavery was only abolished, 150 years ago. We're still in the moral learning curve, early on in that moral learning curve. No, but for me, Neal, heroism is all about self-interest. I'm not honest. I don't respect everyone's rights on principle. I respect everyone's rights on principle. Why? For perfectly selfish reasons. That's the most persuasive motive to get anyone. And if people can see, like I can see, so look, it starts with some simple ones. There's only one cause that can get you to trust me, Neal. Consistently telling the truth. If you even catch me in one or two whoppers, that's it. I've lost the credibility with you forever. So the only price for trust, and trust is a value to me, your trusting me is a real world value to me in practical terms. And there's only one price that can do that, and that's by consistently on principle, telling you the truth. So there are practical reasons for ethics. Real world practical reasons for ethics, and it seems to me that is where the whole idea of an atheist ethics is a silly concept, any more than there's an anti-demon or anti-Zeus or anti-ghost ethics.
Kind of odd. Yeah.
No, to do that is already sort of telling you that he's already
playing you're playing the game of the theist by doing that.
That's it.
You're living in their world.
Premises.
Yeah, you're living in their world. And
if I was to boil it all down to
ironic, my only other encounter with Tjump ever, I've only seen him in 2 videos. I saw him today in that video, and I think he seems like an interesting guy. I think he seems like a cool dude. I would probably get along with him very well.
I could probably have a great time with him.
Interestingly enough, the other video I saw him in, he's debating Darth Dawkins, and I'm not going to say he was losing to Darth Dawkins, but he was playing the game with him too. Like Darth Dawkins is like, what is the definition of ultimate? And he's like, he said something like existence, and then that was like he basically bent over and pulled his pants down for him and like, here, take it. Like you're playing a game with him. Ultimate, it's a word. It's just a word. It means
just
nothing.
A word.
See, that's what I would have said. I would have said, what do you think ultimate is? And then let him define it as it's God. And then you go after him. But he's literally playing his game for him and letting him run all over. And Darth Dawkins has done this a million times, you could tell. But like, I'm just like, why is he letting him play this game?
Right.
It seemed a little bit odd. Like,
so long as our principles are grounded in reality.
The reason why I say that though is because he seems like he's in that mode of thinking where he has to operate within the theist mindset.
That's it. They've accepted. Our new atheists have, to a large extent, and this is, I think, as I
There's
go
no
back to
ultimate.
morality is the issue. They have unconsciously, innocently, they've accepted science. See, they think in order to be a science, ethics has to imitate the methods of physics, and that if they couldn't one day put it down into mathematical formulas, it's not scientific. Well, that's nonsense. Darwin didn't need mathematical formulas to discover natural selection. The methods of biology are different than the methods of physics. And equally so, the methods of ethics are different than the methods of biology, although it's grounded in it. So the whole idea that they have to imitate physics, has, I think, really corrupted their whole approach to it. And because they've accepted implicitly, for example, very few secular people question the substance of Jesus' moral idealism. I think that Christian ethics is full of nonsense. Turn the other cheek, love your enemy. What?
Let go, let go of everything and drop.
They have their followers taking
forget
oaths
about
of
tomorrow.
celibacy.
Yeah, it's basically
For
saying
me-
who cares about the world.
For me, ethics is about successful living here on Earth, or it's not about anything, and we may as well discard it.
And you're not waiting for an apocalypse. Like
No, you see, I want successful life here on
to
Earth.
be in that mindset is such a horrible way to think.
That
Horrible.
is all it is. That's all.
Hardly
It is.
anything good.
Now-
The only good thing about it is like treat people the way you want to be treated. That's it. Other than that, there's nothing good you can find in the New Testament.
Right. See, now there are issues that need to be resolved in ethics, really important ones that answer the questions that ethical philosophers have raised. Let me just give you the biggest one, in my view, that will help you understand, I think, where in reality ethics comes from, which is, as atheists, what we need to do. Look, I have all kinds of values in my life. A value is a good thing, something I like and want, something I pursue, a romantic relationship, a fulfilling career, financial comfort, at least success, enough to survive so I'm not having to worry. There are a lot of values in my life, but I can't judge any of those values out of their wider context.
Right.
Take a piece of cake. A piece of cake is a tasty thing. But if I were to eat the whole cake, I know this is a simple, crude example, but if I were to eat the whole cake, I'd have a tummy ache the next day. I would risk getting diabetes. I would risk health issues. I'll get fat and not look good anymore to my wife. So I can't judge the value of a piece of cake out of the context of all my other values. Looking good, having good health, living long, not having that stomach ache tomorrow. Our values have to be integrated into a consistent whole.
Like in other words, consuming food is not equal to. It's not the same kind of morality, or it is not. It's not the immorality of doing cannibalism.
Quite exactly right. What makes consuming a human being or consuming poison morally objectionable, and why? We need to answer that question. Now, since there's a value chain, why do I want an education? I want an education so that I have the knowledge to do things or to get a better job. Our values go in a sequence. I want this because I want that.
I was just going to say, I literally was going to say consequence, which has the word sequence in it. Your morality, and and correct me if I'm wrong, you're thinking in terms of consequences of what the actual reaction is to your action.
Correct. And to assess anything as a value, much less a moral value, I have to assess all of my values in an integrated fashion, all at once. And there can't be an infinite regress of values. At some point, what's the ultimate value to which all my other values are seeking? And that, of course, is my own life, my own survival. If you look at biology, everything that animals are doing is a struggle to stay alive. Every biological function of a single cell, respiration, digestion, all its different the parts of the cell are trying to keep that cell alive. The difference between living things and non-living things are that living things are taking all kinds of steps to stay in existence. The statue doesn't do anything to stay the Venus de Milo. And in fact, even the sun, which does stuff, isn't doing it in order to stay alive. Once it's burned its fuel, it's gone. However, every life form is struggling to gain the values it needs to live. The food, the air, the safety, the nest, migrate at the right times. Life is the process. Biology is the process of value pursuit.
Now
For animals, life provides the ultimate end to which all of their other ends serve. For human beings, we have a choice. We can act suicidally, unlike other animals. Literally, we can choose to be totally self-destructive if we wanted to. We have to choose our values. And whether those values are objective or not, in my mind, is a question of whether they are directed toward the ultimate value of life. Only life is an end in itself, its own purpose. And only life can, just to finish this, only life can serve as a standard of value. So if it's a universal standard of objective values by which I can judge all human beings, I judge it by the standard of what is good for human life. If it's for me, it's what is good for my life, which must be consistent with that.
And I agree with that.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But how do you basically educate other? For example, people living in South Central Compton, who have struggled to live, right? They're not going to see the world the way you see the world. Their needs and wants are not the same as your needs and wants. How do you across the board get everybody to be on the same playing level field?
I was a DA for 18 years, and I worked with people just like that, who were surviving, who were desperate, who were threatened, who, if you didn't belong or get jumped into a gang, felt fear themselves, and if they didn't get out of that neighborhood, felt that they were going to, get beat up or killed.
Right.
Literally, yes. And yet, even they have had subconsciously inculcated into them a set of moral values. Some of them feel bad and will feel guilty the rest of their lives. Some of them have to become sociopaths to overcome the values that their parents inculcated them with, or school, or a clergyman in the religion inculcated them with, or just the culture in general, their peers inculcated them with. So, and guess what? Even when they join this gang that has twisted values, the gang has values. Let me submit to you, Neal, that a system of values, a code of values, is inescapable for human beings. Philosophy is inescapable. Right. This is why religion really persists. We need some code of right and wrong, good and bad. In my view, good and bad are neither intrinsic in the thing, nor is it just a subjective whim of emotion. Good defines a relationship between something and human life. If something furthers human life, enhances human life, it is the good. If something hurts human life and causes death and destruction, it is the bad. So using human life, the objective requirements, just like in physical health, the objective requirements of human life, in my view, create the objective standard by which we can evaluate chosen human moral value.
Fascinating. That's a good way to put it.
I am not the inventor of this system of ethics. This view of ethics, is my view, is an ethical revolution, the final end to the Dark Ages, and religion's hold over morality. The 20th century novelist philosopher Ayn Rand developed a philosophy she called objectivism. She believed that intrinsicism and subjectivism were the results of religious thinking, and that modern philosophy was still mired in religious thinking. And so she developed before she called it objectivism, she called it a philosophy for living on earth. And she believed that moral principles were the only way to really achieve your selfish long-term interest. She believes that most of the behavior that we call selfish is self-destructive. I would pass the jail as a prosecutor, and people would say to me, "Oh yeah, look at all the selfish people in jail." And I would say, no, these are some, even whether we put them in jail or not, these are some of the most self-destructive people in our society. Right. Instead of developing a productive career where people want to voluntarily trade with them, these people become parasites who people want to fight off from breaking into their homes or stealing their money. They become drug addicts committing suicide on the installment plan.
I feel like if it were true, what Tjump is suggesting, that ethics, what it really is, hasn't been discovered yet, and it is therefore extremely subjective.
Ethics has not yet been discovered.
The way I look at it is, how did the human race survive? What I'm saying is, okay, if it was that subjective, I felt like in the ancient world, people would have killed each other a lot more than they did. And it would
Oh no, there are practical
it would have
reasons
been chaos
for following ethical principles.
if it would.
For example, a society that has in the Mosaic Code, the Mosaic Code has all kinds of crazy things like kosher diet and endorsing slavery and killing people for blasphemy.
Eye for an eye.
It also has, but it also has rules against murder, theft, perjury. What I regard as perfectly sensible rules.
The point that I'm making.
Did they understand why? No, but did it work? Yes. So those societies which banned theft are going to commercially prosper over those societies which don't have rules against theft. Those societies which banned murder are going to thrive. So by a process of social evolution, good ideas got put into ethics. So there are some good ethical ideas presented wrongly in the form of moral commandments. There's no such thing as a commandment. The moral is the understood, the chosen. But given the religious nature of a commandment, some of them made sense. They banned murder, theft, and there are good practical reasons why societies should do that, for the society to succeed, thrive, and prosper.
Now, let me ask you this. I got to ask you this now. So what's the difference between what you're saying and sort of what we're already doing in America? We have a constitution. We have laws that are against stealing, we have it's not, obviously it's not perfect. I'm not saying, this is the perfect.
Well, huge moral progress had to occur for the United States to even come into being.
Absolutely. So what I'm saying is, what are you proposing in your moral theory that we're not already sort of getting at?
Oh, well, a whole new understanding. See, that's the whole thing. We have to have a whole new approach and grounding for ethics so that we understand why we're doing what we're doing. Take the virtue of honesty. If we followed what this atheist thinker said earlier today, he would be forced into saying, well, look, if I'm hiding Nazis during World War II, or if I'm hiding Jews from the Nazis during World War II, if the Nazis come looking for them and knock at my door, I have to commit the immoral action of lying to them to protect these. So there's a moral conflict between the moral and the practical, you see. So either I feel guilty for lying, or by protecting the Jews, or I turn in the Jews to the Nazis. Well, wait a minute here. That totally misunderstands the consequential, contextual nature. My principle of honesty says the following: it is always wrong to attempt to gain a value by lying. If someone is pointing a gun at you, you have every right to lie. And so if the Nazis come knocking at my door and say, are you hiding Jews? I'm going to lie. What do you mean? I don't know any Jews. I'm not going to say second door on the left. And I'm not going to feel bad for lying. Because what I did was perfectly moral. It is only a religious approach that would make our friend who spoke earlier feel guilty for lying to Nazis, eh?
Right.
That guilt is completely religiously generated.
But wouldn't you agree that we're as in the West, in America, for example, we're sort of we have a judge, right? If you're a judge, you're sitting on the bench, and somebody's in there for, let's say lying is illegal, which is not really not. Well, let's just say it is.
Should be legal, by the way.
Well, let's just say lying's illegal, right? And they get sent in front of the judge. What'd you do? Oh, I was hiding this girl. She was about to be raped, and I was hiding her in my house, and I lied to the guy who was coming looking for her, and I saved her life. Okay, you're the judge. You're going to say, go ahead. You're out of here. You're free. I'm not going to lie.
Most lies are not a crime. And lying under those circumstances is very much moral, in my view.
Right. But what I'm saying is, aren't we sort of getting it to that point right now?
To understand, we are human beings. This is the point I was trying to make earlier. Human beings have made tremendous moral evolution. Yeah. Only in the last couple hundred years has the civilized world banned slavery.
Since the Enlightenment,
the United States of America represented I will go so far as to say this: in creating the first secular government, no establishment of religion, no restriction on free exercise of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of peaceful assembly. In so doing, the United States created the first moral nation in history.
I agree.
Subordinating law to moral law.
People like to point out that we had slavery in the beginning, and I totally agree. Horrible way to start your country up. However,
but it was a contradiction of their basic idea.
I was just going to say, the way our Constitution was set up, it was destined to get the ball rolling.
Exactly.
Even though it started a civil war, those are principles that were within the Constitution. That's what gave the North its firepower, basically, to go against the South and say, listen, get rid of those slaves. Let's go to war over this, that. You get what I'm saying?
Whoever thinks they have the moral high ground has an advantage.
So let me ask you this then. This is leading up to this final question, because morality and politics and ethics sort of all go hand in hand.
They do. And politics depends on ethics.
Yeah, exactly. And
the concept of
what do you think is better? What do you think is better, a constitutional republic or a full-blown democracy where everybody just votes, even
constitutional republic?
Okay, I agree.
Or morality is not a subject to popular opinion poll. That's why our framers believed in. This is the importance of having ethical principles that you stick to. Freedom of speech and freedom of religion, the right to privacy, these are principles that cannot be violated by any majority. The Bill of Rights begins, Congress shall make no law. That means, look, if 9 people out of 10 think it's okay to beat you up, Neal, that doesn't make it morally okay. That's still a violation of your rights, whatever supermajority the democracy had. Yeah. Democracy doesn't magically turn something into being morally legitimate.
Yep.
Why you have a democracy or a representative republic is to have a peaceful means of change. So you don't have to have a civil war or revolution every time there's a major change of opinion.
And that's where I have a problem with this simple, easy morality answer is the best decision for the most amount of people. But it's like, whose decision is it?
No, you see what best for most people is your duty to live for the rest of humanity. Can you? Can your decisions really, the fact that I'm eating and someone on the other side of the world might be starving, is that my moral responsibility? No, I want to help everyone I can, perhaps, if I love life. But wait a minute here. Is the whole function of morality service to others? No. See, what altruism does, by calling for self-sacrifice and saying living for others, doing good for others, it says that all of ethics is social. No, you'd need ethics on a desert island. You need to be honest to yourself. You need to have integrity, rationality, productiveness. Yes, even alone on a desert island, you need ethics. Ethics is not just social.
It almost sounds like common sense, but it's really not.
But once we understand the true objective basis of ethics, then we will have the solid answer to the religious. And then and only then will religion die. Insofar as we still use the mental approach that says it's either dogma, intrinsic dogma, or on one hand, like religion or Kant, or it's just pragmatism or utilitarianism, do the math or go by the seat of your pants. What you're saying is no ethics, no object, both are an assault on rational ethics.
If there's anything you can change because sometimes it blows my mind how good they nailed it with this Constitution thing.
Yeah.
With the three branches of the government, judicial, legislative, executive. What would you is there anything you would change, or are we sort of going in the right direction?
Oh, I think that we've taken a very negative turn in recent years, politically speaking. We have blurred the moral lines. We have whole words. Philosophy, in my view, since Kant did much worse than just destroy ethics, in my mind, by trying to defend the religious worldview. He destroyed human knowledge. He undermined reason itself, so to the point that people do not think that objective knowledge is possible. Words have become fluid. We live in a weird age of crusading agnosticism, militant uncertainty. It's the person who makes a moral judgment, like I do, who's looked down at. Because Christianity says, judge not lest you be. I say judge and prepare to be judged. No, sure, make allowance for errors of knowledge, which are all too common, innocent errors. But the point is, morality can only matter if we do judge people. Of course, we forgive people if they've redeemed themselves. Of course, but character matters.
Isn't it fascinating?
We are creatures of habit.
Isn't it fascinating how the Christian right is the ones that hold up the Constitution and the founding fathers as like their thing, like this is all Judeo-Christian values, but when you actually look at what these people were and who they were and what their philosophy was, it was the anti-Judeo-Christian value people that actually created all this that we live in, and they're the ones that are like the most patriotic, the most, you know what I'm saying? It's such because they really want theocracy, but they act like they like freedom. And they say they love freedom.
Well, you see, you look at the right and the left.
Why isn't the liberal left promote freedom of speech and individuality.
They used to, and now
they
that
used to,
they're
right?
falling apart. In my view, on freedom of speech, for example, in particular, that's sad to see happen to the left. But you see, the way I would look at it is this is a kind of religious mind-body dichotomy. The Democrats, the socialists, think that we're basically stomachs to feed, and that morality is a myth, and the consciousness and free will is a myth, kind of like these scientistic positivists like the guest before. And so to them, questions of morality, what we might call spiritual matters, are irrelevant. Words, for example. And so in the old days, they wanted to regulate the economy, but leave words free. And the conservatives were just the other way around. They thought you were just a spirit and your body didn't matter. So they wanted to leave the matter that they didn't think important free. The free market could be free, or plumbing could be free, but what matters is ideas to them. And they wanted to regulate. They wanted to have school prayer. They wanted to have religion and education. So they wanted to regulate the spirit, the mind.
They really
thought important. But
really
now they've both sort of collapsed and switched into each other. So now they've both sort of, the mask is dropped, and I think a more fascist appearance on both sides has come about. The right no longer advocates the free market, freedom in action, and the left no longer advocates freedom of ideas, freedom of speech. And so they've both sort of dropped the mask, and both are disturbingly becoming totalitarians. One moral rule that I think Ayn Rand gave us that could revolutionize the world is that aggressive force is always wrong. The initiation of physical force is always wrong. Aggression is always wrong, whether it's done by a criminal or by the government. And so Ayn Rand envisioned a world, an idealistic world, I grant you, but I think one that is attainable, in which all human adult interaction is voluntary and peaceful. So long as coercion is banned, that's the only function of government, really, is to ban involuntary interaction between humans. So long as humans voluntarily interact, the rational will tend to win.
But here's this, though. And Jacob, I'm sorry, I'm going to let you jump in after this. This is the last thing I want to ask.
Sure, it's fine.
Last thing I want to ask James Valliant, because I'm fascinated by what he's saying right now, and I just want to get more out of him, because I'm learning. I'm changing my mind on this stuff every day, because I'm sort of new to all this.
And I love that. Your fluidity and your openness is a virtue.
Now, here's the thing. Now, I used to be, I was a conservative Christian for a while. Like that was who I was. And I used to be anti-welfare state, anti-globalism. I was the prototype of all that. The libertarian. The Constitution is great, but I always contradict myself just like Christians do. Long story short, I now see that when people are when people are taken care of, like when you have a roof over your head, you have food in your stomach, you have an opportunity. If you're not worried about the basics, you can get your mind right. You can educate yourself. You can focus on what matters. But people who don't have those things have to do that. And so there's a sort of an imbalance. Now, my question is, don't you think the government should have a role in, I don't want to say giant welfare state, but I'm saying, don't you think people should be well off so they have a good starting spot?
If your goal were the well-being of people generally, you would advocate the free market, the only system that has ever done anything to help the condition of the poor in human history. The truth of the matter is that the United States government, the United States history, between the early 1800s and the 1960s, was making historically unprecedented strides against poverty. When you look at the poverty rate in the United States from 1800 to the mid-60s, it was precipitously falling faster than it had ever fallen anywhere in human history. It was when Lyndon Johnson declared his war on poverty that America's progress against poverty came to a screeching halt. It's hard to find on the internet, but you can find these. These are all facts, leftist and right.
I get what you're saying.
So in other words, what capitalism, the free market, was known for. See, before capitalism, you had like a teeny percentage, 1.0000% of the population lived like kings, and 99.9999% lived on the verge of starvation and poverty. Today, Capitalism is characterized by the creation of a vast middle class. And the middle class in an ordinary Western country today lives better than an Egyptian pharaoh or Louis XIV could have ever dreamed of living. He has higher quality and variety of food, better clothes, safer environment, less violence around him, more entertainment, better quality of entertainment, not to mention health care. No, capitalism is what has helped the ordinary person. The ancient Greeks knew about the steam engine, but it made no difference to the ordinary lives of people until it started being used in mass production for the masses, for profit purposes. Capitalism is what raised the standards of living for human beings.
Let me ask you this, though. Now,
yes.
So I look at it like this. This is my personal opinion on capitalism, socialism, the balance between the two. So we obviously we're not one or the other. We're a mixed economy.
We are certainly a very mixed economy.
Yeah. So well, the way I see it is, if you have a capitalist country with an open market as your basis, but you use socialism as like a medicine, like a drug, right? So if you overdose on a drug and you just do it without care, you're going to be an addict. You're going to be screwed up. But if you administer it correctly, and so the railroads need to be paid for, the roads need to be paid for, the police.
When the government started to subsidize railroads, of course, it was a giant boondoggle. The first transcontinental railroad was a government subsidized affair. The men who were involved were crooks who took the government for a fortune, and the stupid railroad had to be repaired and totally rebuilt within 20 years.
I don't doubt any of that.
On the other hand, the first guy who built the first totally private transcontinental railroad, James J. Hill, within 10 years, he built a transcontinental railroad that actually developed the economy of the area and didn't need government handouts and was profitable throughout and actually helped the economy. And he didn't get some graft from the government.
So you think we need some more Elon Musk running around building?
Well, Elon Musk to some extent even gets some help, but not mostly. We live in a mixed economy where even good businessmen have to sometimes take advantage of but every regulation helps create a monopoly.
Do you agree with me?
It creates increases costs of entry, makes it harder so that companies are less responsive to consumers. Quality goes down, craftsmanship goes down.
Do you agree with me that a little bit of socialism is necessary to sort of as a medicine, as but not like an overdosing drug that you can just use whenever you want?
Well, let me put it this way. When we started to put the camel's nose under the tent with socialism, it took over and became a snowball down the hill. Now, after the end of every Republican administration, the government is much larger, spends much more money. We have more regulations, more government agencies, Democrat or Republican. It is the Democrats and socialism which thereafter sets the agenda once you compromise on the principle. This is the other point about moral principles. If you really cared about the poor, look, you're an American. You, no doubt, if you ever watch TV, you see all those commercials for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. There, a poor child or his family doesn't have to pay a dime. A dime. No child in this country, because of private charity, who needs medical care goes without, or needs to go without, because of Shriners, because of St. Jude's. In a free society, all the great charities that really are effective, the Goodwill, the Salvation Army, the YMCA, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, well, forever they became later. But the point is that all these private charities were invented during the age of capitalism. And frankly, to really help the poor, you can really only do it at arm's length, where it could really matter. The fact of the matter is that in a free society, people wouldn't let children go starving. They wouldn't let children go without medical care. They would not. The idea that somehow people were uneducated before government provided it is a total myth. In fact, the advent of the welfare state needed to immediately be reversed by the 1990s. From the 1960s, LBJ's war on poverty, we had to have Clinton, a Democrat, sign welfare reform because welfare was creating more poverty than it was fixing.
I think you're right, because I think when you have a welfare state, what it does is, all right, let's say I'm on it, right? I lost my job, so I go on welfare. They're giving me $200 a week or something like that. And now they tell me if I get a job, I'm cut from that. So now you're sitting there. Now you're in a situation where it's hard to find a high paying job that's more than that $200 a week. You're not going to take a $300 job a week because now I got to work all those hours. Plus I'll lose my $200 plus my food stamps. It's like you almost are incentivized to stay there.
Right.
Because you're there.
Well, see, this is why people who don't believe in free will are pseudoscientific people who are trying to pretend that free will doesn't exist and be scientific because we don't believe in free will. It's determinism. Well, if you believe in determinism, you don't believe motives or incentives matter. You can pay people to be poor or unemployed and it won't have any effect on their behavior. Or you could subsidize corporations and it won't have any effect on their behavior. No, of course not. Or you can threaten antitrust for the big tech companies and not think that they won't be kowtowing to the politicians in Washington. Of course they will be. And every regulation will increase monopolistic abuse on the part of private companies because it creates barriers to competition, the entry of competition. No,
Jacob, do you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I've just got.
Me too. Jacob's bad to talk. I hate doing this to Jacob. I do this to him all the time.
I just thought. Let me see if okay. I still remember what I was gonna say. That's fine. I was just gonna finish the thought that I was trying to say earlier about if morality was as subjective as Tjump seems to think. I think the world would have been more chaotic back then, and it would have made it less likely for the human race to have survived. It would have made it less likely for humans to have discovered morality on their own. It's like, I feel like he doesn't understand the gravity and of what he's actually saying. If it was really that subjective, history would have been a disaster.
Part of the problem is they're trying to smuggle in this idea that people should live for the well-being of others. I can't make you happy, Neal. Only you can make you happy. I don't even know what it takes to make you happy. I couldn't even try to make you happy if I wanted to. I devoted my whole life to it. No, we each are responsible for our own happiness. And that's where morality begins. Yes, we're all humans, and so certain human principles apply to all of us. That's ethics, universal ethics. But there's also a great deal of very individual variation. For you, maybe being a doctor is the thing that will give you most rewards in life. For me, being a lawyer. So, but that would be objective for me and objective for you. It's not as though values are ever subjective. So long as life is the standard, the objective standard of values. The reason why freedom works, the reason why there were so many new inventions under capitalism, the light bulb, the automobile, the airplane, the automated assembly line, which made us all more productive, is because the mind was liberated and free. The reason why a culture that doesn't have a censorship is vibrant and alive is because people are free to think and differ and disagree with each other. If people are not free to act differently, then you stagnate culture. If people are not free to act differently, you stagnate technological progress. Yeah. Freedom is the condition for the operation of the human mind. The human mind is our only tool of survival, our only way of knowing, and therefore our basic tool. We have lots of tools, hammers, nails.
But I also think there's another wrinkle that we have to address, though, because it's everything you're saying does make sense, but there are some valid points on the left as far as, and this is all morality. I know it sounds like I'm talking politics, but this is morality if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like creating a system in which people can thrive and have have equal rights and this, that, and the third. Now, if you have an open free market and just let it go, right? Yeah, you could probably
kill racism, for example.
You probably
free
will.
market would necessarily kill racism or anything irrational like that. If an employer wants to cut off his customers based on race, he's providing an opportunity for his competitor to have those customers. If he wants to cut off quality in his employee,
but what about
workers based on race? He's going to give him even more.
Now, let's say you got 20.
It takes the law to keep racism alive.
Let's say
Democrats have been the ones doing it since they began.
Let's say you got 20 James Valliants and 5 me's and 1 Jacob, and you're James Valiant. You're just a go-getter. You going out, you're educated, and you go out and start a bunch of businesses. And let's say Jacob is one. There's only one of you, but you're a really hard worker, and you go out and he employs you, but I'm like kind of like a slow. There's 5 of me, and we're slow, and I keep going back to alcohol, and I keep screwing up, and I keep going back to jail, and all of a sudden I'm screwed up. How do you? But okay, that all is to say, we have a world where not everybody's the same, right? That's basically what I'm saying. But now you get to the point where it's like you have the power to employ me, but I basically now I'm under your thumb. How do you create a system in which I'm protected to not be basically like enslaved by the guy working for the guy who owns everything?
You know, what a bizarre thing to turn voluntary employment into an idea, to use the concept of slaves. It's like calling businessmen robber barons. You know, back in the Middle Ages, barons at a sword point, using violent threats, would, extort money from people passing by. They were thieves. They were violent thugs and thieves.
But don't you think
businessmen were the opposite?
Like
well, first let's understand, how did Henry Ford and John Rockefeller get rich? By providing something people voluntarily bought.
Yeah.
If Ford did not provide a cheap car, he could not have gotten rich. And the more people he satisfied who voluntarily wanted his product.
Didn't he also employ people at a cheap wage with horrible working conditions? And
like the opposite.
They have no other option to work for. Who else are they going to work for? They have to work for
like the opposite. Henry Ford increased wages. People wanted to work. You know why? Because he wanted his employees to be able to buy his product. So he created the cheapest car he could, and he employed Henry Ford did not exploit his workers. He was above any requirement. No. In fact, labor unions owe it all backwards. Why don't we have a minimum wage of $100,000? Well, you just unemploy everyone whose value is not worth $100,000 to employees. You had to have a 40-hour work week be the norm before it could be imposed by law. You had to have child labor basically be unnecessary. See, back when there was child labor, it saved families from death by starvation. So the idea that businessmen want to exploit their workers is just bizarre. No, they want productive, happy employees. And an employment situation, being able to leave a job, is different than slavery. I myself have happily left jobs on my own. Quit. Goodbye.
Back to my the reason why I brought up the difference between me and Jacob, though, is because Jacob's willing to work 60, 90 hours a week, right? But my character, the fake character of me, can't do that because I can't. I can barely do 20 hours a week, right? Well,
all the more important for you to let people get rich.
I get what you're saying. Let me finish this though. So
sure,
we got Jacob Berman. He's a superstar worker, and you own everything because you're just you're educated. You know everything, right? You're just
John Rockefeller.
You know where to put a business and all that. But Jacob's a hard worker, and he's working 90 hours a week, and he's killing it. And I'm just like, I just want a job where I can work 20 hours a week, and I kind of want a handout, to be honest, but I can't get that because I have to work. So I guess what I'm getting at is mental health kind of plays a role.
Well, people should rise to the level that's appropriate for them. If a person takes a job that's over their head, then that's not either good for their happiness or their well-being.
And how do you regulate that?
Well, I don't want to regulate that. People will find, in a free market, people will find the correct place. If you find it fulfilling, I have lots of friends who have all kinds of jobs. One of my dear friends is a truck driver, and what fulfillment he gets out of it. He loves being on the open road. He loves doing what he's doing. If it fits to find the job that's appropriate for you, there's no bad work. There's work that lousy people don't want to do. And when we say that people are, and if I am not as brilliant or as hardworking as someone else, it's better that I live in a free society because I can take advantage of their smarts and their hard work.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I don't have to invent the light bulb to take advantage of it if I'm poor in America.
That's the entire reason why I brought up the difference between a hard worker who can do everything demanded from him with somebody who kind of can't. But that person sets the bar high, 40 hours a week, overtime, comes into work every day, never calls in. But the other person who kind of can't keep up, what do you do with those people? Do you just say, your fault?
People should get what they deserve. In other words, if someone is more creative or if someone is a harder worker, that should be reflected. It is unjust. Equality of outcome is the opposite of morality. The person who works harder, it is just that he get paid more. Sometimes people provide so many great values. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, they provide so much value, they have earned their billions. In fact, they've only taken a teeny percentage of the value they provided to everyone else. Sure. They really have only taken. I still can't get to Henry Ford to pay him or Thomas Edison to pay him for the light bulb.
All right, now
So
the
they
last
only
thing.
take a teeny bit. They only ask, the billionaires actually are the victims of a terrible injustice, only taking a teeny bit of the actual value they give
A
to
lot of
everyone
people are
else.
going to hate that right there, but I get what you're saying.
You
And
see?
but now let me ask you this though. So
But if someone screws
okay,
up,
no, here's what I'm gonna say.
if you're going to persist
You
in being a
mentioned
drug addict,
equality. You mentioned equality of outcome being sort of more harmful than it sounds. But
it's evil.
this is exactly what I was trying to get at the whole time. I just didn't know, but now I figured it out. How do you create equality of opportunity? How do you do that?
Getting back to our drug addict or persistent person who's not correcting, this will help answer that question because I can see the connection there, right?
There you go.
In a free market, he will face the consequences of his own irresponsibility, and he will deserve it, won't he? If he doesn't take efforts to support his own life, he has sort of merited the results. I believe in ethics, and I believe ethics has the effect. The enforcer of ethics isn't some god in heaven, but reality here on earth. And liars won't be trusted. Lazy people won't get rich. So ethics has its own consequences. So let's look at charity. If charity comes from the government indiscriminately, it goes to people who it may only enable addicts. It may only enable the lazy. Whereas if I give the charity, I'm going to make sure it's not more than I can afford. And on the other side, I'm going to make sure that I'm not just enabling an alcoholic or drug addict. I'm going to see the effect. I'm going to make sure that the money I give isn't having a negative effect. So if you want help to be effective, it must be voluntary and not government indiscriminatory. Right. Because that will only encourage vice and only enable self-destruction. It's not good for the person.
But
now you ask, how do we create opportunity, equality of opportunity? The fact of the matter is that education, for example, I believe is an essential thing.
Right.
But the idea that equality of opportunity is everything that it's cracked up to be is a total myth. Abraham Lincoln was born to illiterates in a log cabin and taught himself to read by candlelight. He became an eloquent, highly educated president of the United States who ended slavery in this country. Henry Ford grew up in poverty. John D. Rockefeller, the first billionaire in terms, right, in modern money terms, grew up in total poverty, misery. Many of the wealthiest people in the world today grew up in poverty, and some of them in illiterate conditions. Take, for example, on large-scale numbers, people, for example, Asian immigrants from East Asia to the United States outperform white Americans dramatically. Did you know that, economically? That Asian Americans who came from situations of literal slavery in the 20th century, of literal illiteracy and ethnic abuse and cleansing, they come to this country and within 1 or 2 generations, they outperform whites.
Now those are all great examples, but
now on the other hand, I have seen so many rich kids
screw up.
Yeah, that all the effing opportunity in the world did them zero good.
Don't care, right?
Now let's look at education. We have poured money per capita into these public schools. Do you know certain public schools in inner city Chicago are per capita get more money than some of the finest private schools spend on their children who get into Harvard and who ace the SATs? It is not a function of government money either to create equality of opportunity. In fact, to the extent, this is going to be a principle, I think it's going to be sort of paradoxical to the way socialists think about it or welfare statists think about it. To the extent the government intervenes on behalf to create equality, they are being counterproductive. They are, in fact, only increasing not only racial resentment, but undermining the self-esteem of the people they're helping. Did I really get into Harvard on my own as I deserved? Etc. No, they're actually undermining self-esteem, undermining quality, undermining the progress towards racial equality. If you want racial equality, I'll go back to my basic principle. Under freedom, reason tends to win. Reality tends to win. If people are free to choose, and if all I can do is persuade you to buy my product, all I can do is persuade. I can't force you. All I can do is run ads or persuade you that my product is better, cheaper, more efficient, better tasting, whatever. And notice that's what they're constantly doing in the free market, trying to sell you, because all they can do is persuade. They can't force. So long as persuasion rules rather than force, reason and reality will tend to win.
Right. Now,
Includes racism.
I get it. That makes a lot of sense what you're saying. But then you still have the situations where people are born into a situation, and it tears down their mental health. They
Absolutely.
grow up, they have abusive family, whatever the situation is, and they become the people that I was making an example of, who can't do a 40-hour week. They can't. Mental health is off.
There are people who grow up in such confidence that we can't expect, them to be primary for.
What do you do with people like that?
Of course, the point, as I said, human beings, let me start at the beginning. Human beings, to the extent that they should take care of themselves.
Absolutely.
Right. And even people who are not the sharpest tools in the shed are perfectly functional and capable of and finding having a wide variety of jobs available and opportunities available in the free market.
Entry-level careers, yeah.
Letting people find the right place for themselves, right level.
But that's where
that's part of what the free market allows.
That's what a pro-union guy would come in and say. But look at these unions; they can hire people off the street. They have no education, high-paying jobs. Boom, boom, boom. There you go.
Well, unions, of course, I have nothing against private unions. They're voluntary organizations. Yeah. It's when they go to the government, and they can do good things if they're just voluntary organizations, unions. It's when they go to the government and force collective bargaining or minimum wage or something, or keep out foreign, what unions really, unions began in this country as racist organizations trying to keep blacks out of certain professions. That's how labor unions began in this country. And then they proceeded to want to keep immigrants out of this country so they could keep wage rates up. And those, I think, are illegitimate, racist in basically motive.
You also see a lot of unions that will they'll back a certain political figure and ensure that person to win, and then get funding from that person, and then it becomes this big game. And
see, and so if you're going to oppose free trade, free trade can you can put on tariff on cars. Let's say you put tariff on Japanese cars. It makes those Japanese cars more expensive for American consumers to buy. This gives American consumers, who are less efficient and have to charge higher rates, a competitive equality. Well, what are you doing? You're encouraging inefficient American companies. You're producing bad cars and letting them stay in existence. And what you're doing is you're increasing the price for every other consumer. So you're protecting the auto workers at the expense of everyone else in the country, who now has to spend more on cars that they otherwise would have. And what would they have otherwise spent the money on? Something else. Clothes, food. So what you've done is you've put every other worker, and you've reduced jobs in every other field to protect this one field.
Right.
So as economists have long since pointed out, free trade helps the general prosperity better than any tariff ever could. Yeah. Tariffs are self-destructive. Now, if unions come along and want tariffs and immigration restrictions to keep wages up, they're not helping. They're hurting. And to the extent they use government to do that, labor unions are on the wrong side. One of the reasons I opposed Trump was that he took the old, government coerced labor position against immigration and free trade.
Yeah.
I'm a consistent advocate of freedom for moral reasons. Now, I don't think that I think that Ayn Rand's meta-ethics, her approach to ethics, life is the standard of ethics, and her egoism are the basis for ethics. And I don't see why even leftists can't see that serves as a better objective basis for ethics. Yeah. But in her view, and one of the reasons why they reject her is her politics, which I've been explaining as well. They don't like her politics. They reject her revolutionary approach to objective ethics, even though she was an atheist. But it seems to me that her arguments can inform any political view. Politics must be informed by ethics. The reason why she thought political freedom, why she was the mother of the whole libertarian political movement, is she thought freedom was the condition that allows for the operation of the human being's basic tool of survival. Free societies will be more prosperous because you've banned force. You've made a society where it's only voluntary interaction. And she said that's the only civilized sort of society anyway. But besides, that's how to release the power of the human mind. And that's why technology and culture has thrived in free societies in the last couple hundred years. It's a moral argument, but it's a moral and practical. See, for her, there can never be a dichotomy between the moral and the practical at all, because she realizes the religious origins and of that, and how that has corrupted all ethical thinking, including that of atheists.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
No, would I have? You want to know? You know, when you asked Ayn Rand, so would you cut off welfare mothers first? No, you cut off the subsidies to corporations. You cut off these regulatory agencies first. You stop all these things that even Trump wanted. Welfare mothers. I have to read up more on that. She said welfare mothers would be the last thing I would reform in government. That's because they're victims too, frankly. This whole inflation thing is the cause of government monetary manipulation, of Biden cutting off gas supplies. And so who is inflation hurt most? The poor, those on fixed incomes. It's a brutal, inflation is a brutal, look, go to the grocery store, go to the gas station. So it's now people who hurt the worst.
To sort of slow things down, this has been a good talk. I'm really enjoying this. And I'm
sorry if I got a little excited.
No, I learned so much from you. I learned so much from you. You don't even know how much I learned.
Thanks.
I love talking to you. Now, to bring it back to morality itself, not the political. Politics and morality are left and right handed like this.
Right.
But to bring it back to morality, where do you think, now, a theist will say morality only comes from God. Where do you think it comes from our experiences and history and historic, like, as time progresses, do we grow as a collective society? What do you think?
You know, as a form of you're asking a form of the question that Ayn Rand herself was asked frequently, and so she had to write a whole article in response to this frequently asked question. The question is, it's absolutely it gets right to the core. Who is the final authority in ethics?
Right.
If not God. Well, her response is, well, who's the final authority in physics or chemistry or medicine? There is no final authority but reality. And reason is our only means of knowing it. So reality will be the arbiter of disputes in morality, just as reality is the ultimate arbiter of disputes in physics. And just as a physicist can be, if you specialize, you can learn more about physics than everyone else, and we call you a physicist. And it's the same with philosophy. You can learn about philosophy and know more about it than the ordinary layperson, and so become a bit of an expert. But nonetheless, there's no final authority other than reality. If I want to build a bridge, or if I want to not fall off a cliff or a skyscraper, I have to know physics to the extent of gravity and not to step off the skyscraper. Right. And similarly, even as a layman, I have to know ethics to the extent that I don't do the equivalent of stepping off skyscrapers by committing murder or telling lies.
Wow. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
If reality, this is what atheist ethics needs. If reality is the thing that we're going by, and only reality, then what's the practical point of ethics? Why are we doing it? And what's the factual basis for it?
That's what's funny is that it always comes back to evolution in a weird way, because we are evolving and we are looking at ourselves in the past and trying to learn from the past.
And we're only now.
In the same way natural evolution occurs, we are seeing it happen, and we're actually controlling it a little bit.
Well, imagine living 1,000, 2,000 years ago before anyone knew anything about physics. It would all seem like magic to you. Imagine living 500 years ago where people were being tortured and burnt at the stake because they had some variant Christian view.
Imagine showing somebody from 2,000 years ago your computer screen with me talking.
Bro, they'd think they'd be terrified. First, they would have some kind of fear of the unknown.
They would think you were a prophet.
Certainly think it's magic.
I was God.
Right.
They would think you're a prophet talking to me, who's God.
Exactly. So, yes. So this is why a lot of people will say, boy, you're an Ayn Randist or occultist. But the reason why people treat those who admire Rand treat her so seriously is because they realize that what she did was a revolution in philosophy, and really provides an objective basis now for ethics that sort of settles the final issue with religion.
Does your book give a good biography of her, or should I get that separately?
My book on Ayn Rand was an analysis of previous biographies of Ayn Rand.
So if I just read your book without knowing anything about her, you think I'd get a good grasp of?
Yes.
Should I read up on her first?
Well, let me put it this way. It is a response to the earlier biographies that had been written about Rand.
Okay.
But it's sensible on its own terms. You'll learn everything you need to know about Ayn Rand from reading the book. So you can glean a lot, but it wasn't meant to be a real biography in which, a friend of mine, Shoshana Knapp, professor of literature at the University of Virginia, is writing, I think, a good biography of Ayn Rand. She goes into her artistic development and details in a way that I can't. But you will get a general idea of her life and her achievement if you read my book. When I first wrote the book, wrote the first part of the book, it appeared on the internet more than 20 years ago. And the estate of Ayn Rand caught wind of it, and Ayn Rand's heir contacted me and said, could you use some unpublished journals, private journals of Ayn Rand, because they appear to confirm what you were saying. And I said, yeah, I could. So in my book, you'll find it's the only source for certain material that comes straight from the best-selling novelist's own hand in her private journals about these people who wrote these biographies.
I'm definitely going to check that out. Jacob, you got any final words?
No, I enjoyed this discussion.
I enjoyed this discussion.
Yeah, I pretty much agreed with both of you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is common sense. You would think that it would be more, but
I wish.
Yeah, exactly. It's just people are very, I don't know, they're just very resistant to certain things, and this is
narrow-minded.
Conservatism. There's a certain inertia against change.
What I've been wanting to say. I guess I do have words after all.
Sure.
It's like this situation with Tjump. For some reason, and this may be a terrible analogy, but I'm not sure. Let's see how it comes out. This reminds me of Plato's cave, where these guys are just stuck in a cave. They refuse to see what's really going on in the outside world. They can't. And I feel like this guy is just
still looking at the shadows in the cave.
Yeah, trapped in there.
Well, it's interesting because he sort of operates in a theist mindset.
That's my point.
He's trying to plug in the gaps with atheism.
The thing is, it's not just enough.
He admits it, though. He admits it. He said, I want to make atheism a religion. He said that.
Exactly. See,
he admits it. I respect it.
Atheism is simply the lack of one mistake. It's not committing one error. It's not enough to destroy the absurd bases of religious ethics, which is easy to do because it's based on whatever God says so. But we have to actually create a positive, objective basis for ethics. It's not so much important what we don't believe in. It's far more important what we do believe in. Frankly, and so while it's great to demolish an idea that's been harmful in the past, and I think we need to do that with dictatorship, religion, every harmful slavery, every women's inequality, every harmful idea of the past, racism, every harmful idea of the past. But then we have to develop a positive system of ethics. What is good? What should we be striving for? What inspires us? And so long as religion holds the monopoly on ideas like reverence and inspiration, we're always going to be at a disadvantage, we secular thinkers. And it is possible to end the mental, and that's what we have to do. We have to end the mental chains of the Dark Ages and religious thinking and change our whole mode, the method by which we even consider these subjects. Because it's really just about life on earth if we're atheists, isn't it?
Yeah. And making sure the world's better for the next generation and not just selfishly for ourselves.
Well, I would say that making the world better is the most selfish thing I could do.
Yeah.
If the only reason I want the
species
to have a good future is because I'm biased to humans, I'm a human.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point.
When I wrote Creating Christ, I knew I wouldn't have much influence in my lifetime. And I knew, in fact, when I do philosophy, philosophers distinctly don't have much influence in their lifetime. They really have to, the philosophy of one generation becomes the common sense, though, of the next, doesn't it? So you know, though, that you're working for a long-term thing, but nothing can be more rewarding, even selfishly, than knowing that you're improving the environment for yourself and for your species.
Absolutely. Good way to put it.
See, life is what it's about for me.
Yeah.
I know the objective reason why I'm good.
Exactly.
And all without recourse to God or emotions or...
Right.
Right.
Exactly. That's well put. I mean, that's nothing else to add to that. That's well put.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the discussion, guys.
I did too, very much.
We should have it again sometime.
I can talk philosophy. Yeah. I have an undergraduate degree from New York University in philosophy, and since then I have studied privately with PhDs and serious philosophers.
It's funny, now you'll probably understand why I asked the questions I asked, because I studied economics at UB. So I'm thinking in terms of the economy, as you can tell with the questions I was asking. So
you've got a utilitarian sort of mindset.
Yeah, I do. Right. I do. That's exactly. kind of how I was
great economists who were utilitarians.
Yeah.
And because they really thought that it was good for general overall prosperity, which is what we should be doing the best for the most that we can, given limited resources. So that was the normal. Utilitarianism is the normal approach of even many economists whom I admire, like the Austrians.
Well, you got the Milton Friedman mindset, you got the Keynesian mindset, and then it's obviously there's the Marxist, and then there's the Adam Smith, and it's
I'm one of your Austrians. I am the closest things to me in economics, and I minored in economics at NYU, where I studied from some of the great Austrians. Ludwig von Mises and F.A. Hayek are if you go to that area, that school of economics, that's where I tend to.
And they all address a certain problem, it seems like, and it's sort of a tug of war between all of those. You can't really have it. Nobody can. If you have to. Like there's always going to be something that you can't cover. If that makes sense.
Well, economics is still developing as a science, and I would say that one of the great Austrians who was a student of Ayn Rand's, Professor George Reisman, a great professor of economics, his treatise on capitalism, I think, really does bridge that gap between the empirical and the theoretical. It's inductive as opposed to deductive, as most Austrians are, and also appreciates the ethical necessity of freedom. And it really required that combination, I think, to fully understand. See, for Adam Smith, he couldn't understand. He had traditional Christian ethics. So to him, the idea that the pursuit of selfishness by some people should lead to the general benefit, the common benefit of most other people, was a paradox. It was an invisible hand. Yeah. What a weird thing to explain. How can someone's selfishness lead to general well-being?
Right.
And so to him, it was a mystery, an invisible hand. To Ayn Rand, of course it makes sense. When everyone is pursuing their rational self-interest in a peaceful way, we're all better off. I'm better off when you're selfish. Neal, of course I am. You're producing values that are important to me. And just as I'm producing values important to you, your selfish interest and my selfish interest does not conflict.
So that
when
guy,
given a free society.
So that guy is saying that acts of good coming out of selfishness is so bizarre. It has to come from a god.
Right, because he accepts the premise of Christian altruism. Whereas if you said, well, no, wait a minute. Ethics is about successthis life on earth. Therefore, your gain is no loss to me. In fact, your production helps me.
I just pulled up one of my this is something I was doing in school, actually. I made a political compass. I made my own from scratch. So do you know what a political compass is?
Right.
I'm going to show you what I made. I don't know if I agree with this anymore.
Okay.
This was probably when I was deconverting when I made this, but I still had that mindset. That I was still that that mindset. I don't know, whatever. But here's it. Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
All right. Host disabled. You got it. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. I'll do it.
No problem.
Hold on.
Right.
There. Try now.
Okay. Let's see.
See, let me just throw this in as we're waiting. Socialists, you see, are often atheists, like Marxists, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But they have totally accepted the Christian standard of ethics, haven't they?
Yeah.
It's a communal property, like in the Book of Acts. It's what we do for the least of us and for the poor. That's what it's all about, right? To them, they are still basically, socialism is the politics of Christianity, if you will.
Yeah,
Whatever else you say.
Can you see this?
Yes, I can.
So I made this whole all from scratch when this was
Authoritarian left, authoritarian right.
Yeah.
Right. Libertarian left, libertarian right.
No, I threw all those names in there. I threw the feudalism, the protectionism, the egalitarianism.
I love it. You've got Ron Paul in there.
Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, would you agree? I mean, I've showed this to people. Some people think this is like, oh, I would put this here. And everyone has their own opinions on where things
I met, it was the great anarcho-capitalist, Mr. Libertarian himself, Professor Murray Rothbard, who was a friend of mine in the 1980s, who introduced me to then Congressman Ron Paul after he was in the early 1980s. Yeah, I thought when I went to this economic conference in Washington, D.C., that I'd go hide in a corner someplace. But Murray Rothbard knew me, a very famous economist for libertarians.
Wow.
And so he cut a beeline over to me and sat next to me at my table. And so Congressman Ron Paul came over. All these luminaries came over. And I got to meet the father of Senator Rand Paul.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
But
he's a legend. He really is a legend. Whether you like him or not, it's fucking Ron Paul.
Exactly. I mean,
let me ask you this: what do you think about these quotes that I wrote in there on the corners?
Anarchism, individualism, traditionalism.
No. In red, I put quotes on the farthest corners of the political spectrum. So these are obviously like ridiculous on purpose.
Let's all just live in nature.
That's the bottom left. The
get off my property. Or I shoot you. See, I'm not a libertarian.
George, death to anyone who opposes.
I'm not. See, there are some kooky libertarians. Let me pull back. Ayn Rand was not a libertarian, although they were largely inspired by her philosophy. Yeah. Ayn Rand pulled back because she said they really didn't have a clear philosophy of politics. I don't think, for example, it's okay to put up deadly booby traps just to protect property.
Yeah.
I don't think it's okay to have a tank or a nuclear missile in your backyard and that's your freedom, basic freedom.
Right.
No.
Yeah. You got to have some sort of checks and balances.
I'm not an anarchist.
Now,
I think government is necessary, and so long as it only protects people from physical force.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what's funny about this is I just remembered this now. Now, most of my classmates put Hitler on the top right. Like 90% of them did, actually.
Which is crazy, of course, because Hitler.
You notice how I put him in the top middle?
Yeah. Oh, well, see, I would even put him further to the left.
I've had people tell me that.
Hitler's was a worker party, and he advocated self-sacrifice even more directly for the Volk, for the collective people. He was racist. He wasn't classist. And that was really the difference, right? Marx thought social class was everything. Hitler thought race and nationality was everything. But he was a believer in Workers' Party socialism. Right. He denounced capitalism as harshly as Stalin and Lenin.
Right, and my reasoning was he wasn't a full-blown communist as Stalin was.
No,
he sort of opposed that, but he wasn't on the far right either. So my reasoning behind it was to put him in the middle of fascism on the top.
Right, and I agree with you putting King George in the true far right.
He's like the real monarch, the
divine right of kings. Yeah, theocracy.
Yep.
So that I basically like. I like the way you put that out.
And then you got Friedman starting off with Chomsky on the bottom.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
I love it. See, the truth is that the people that I sometimes will hate the most are people like Chomsky, but also occasionally agree with. Some, you know what I'm saying? So very interesting the way you did that. As I say, the right and the left has sort of divided things up into a false alternative where I can't really agree with either one of them.
Right.
Where I either have
people forget about the up and down too.
Exactly.
People forget about that. Yeah.
And so, we need to have a different approach to the way we look at political opinion in this country. And no question, we have to transcend left and right as a dichotomy. I'm neither a conservative nor a socialist. So I'm an advocate of classical liberalism.
I agree. That's exactly where I'd say. And that Sendlak, as you remember, that's my last name. That's where I put myself. I try to keep myself in the middle, but down, not in the authoritarian, more libertarian, but try to stay as middle as possible. Hopefully, I'm in the middle. I like to think I'm in the middle. Sometimes we all think we're in the middle, but sometimes we're not.
I suppose we could just go at one end and put it, how big you think government should be, and so you could put totalitarians at one end and anarchists at the other. Only I believe the practical effect of anarchism would be gang warfare and eventually some dictator.
Yeah.
So they kind of end up with each other. So I'd put a circle, right? And I'd put at the other end of the circle a government which only uses force in self-defense or retaliation, a government which is a government, not anarchy, but one that bans physical force in society and ensures that all human interaction is voluntary. So I'd sort of have a circle of true true liberty at one end and dictatorship and anarchy at the other.
It's a good idea. Make it like instead of making it a square, sort of make it a different shape, like a circle.
And that way we could still distinguish our dictators of the right and our dictators of the left as we get closer to either side.
Yeah, that's me in the middle of Sendlak.
Right. But that's just a suggestion. I don't think there's any magic in laying it out. It depends on what your purpose is in the scale.
I do think, and this is one thing I learned, is it is good to know the definitions and to know and to define things, to put everything in a spot so you know where it is, instead of just being we
all need philosophy.
Yeah.
We all see. You could specialize in physics. I could specialize in medicine. You could be an electrician. I could be a plumber. And that specialization helps you be good at what you're doing, and we take advantage of each other's expertise. But when it comes to philosophy, and yet there are expert philosophers, like I say, who can help us because they are smarter because they specialize. But on the other hand, we all need to some extent to be philosophers. We all need to know that our actions are ethical. We all need to know what qualifies as knowledge, how we know what we know, do we believe that knowledge is possible, and what qualifies as knowledge for us. And of course, we need to know the basis of our values. What do we believe is good and bad, and why? Those are questions that involve every subject, and no human can escape. So I think one of the reasons why religion is persistent is because philosophy is a necessity, and religion is sort of a crude, primitive form of philosophy. Before people are really rational and self-conscious about philosophy, we have religion. But that doesn't obviate the need to still have a frame of reference towards life. And so I think philosophy is the most crucial subject. It sets the methodology and values for all other topics and conditions them, ethics in particular.
Absolutely.
I hope this made sense.
Yeah,
it made
did.
Great.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
This is very well put. Yeah.
Jacob,
Well, thank you. This has been a great.
It has been. Yeah.
Thank
you both for joining.
I have nothing to add. I mean,
I don't either.
If people are more interested in the philosophy of Ayn Rand, the ethical ideas of Ayn Rand, I would recommend her novels The Fountainhead, written in 1943, and Atlas Shrugged, published in 1957. She also has a nonfiction.
I do know about
book.
Atlas Shrugged.
I'll leave links to those in the description box.
Oh, thank you. She has nonfiction books, including Philosophy Who Needs It, published in the 1970s, and a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, specifically about ethics.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right. So, and she explains basically in far more detail and more elaborately the ethical system that I just sort of outlined.
Nice. I'll definitely check that out.
All right.
Well, thank you, guys.
All right, guys. I'll see you guys next week, hopefully.
Yeah. We'll talk about Philo then for sure.
Yeah.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.